Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing my climb to hit Legend rank in Season 20 of Pokemon GO Battle League in the Open Great League. And the main team that I use for climbing is honestly a team that I think is pretty cool. On the lead, Malamar, specifically running high attack to get a Psywave breakpoint versus Toxapex. On the save switch, Shadow Drapion, and as the closer, a non-Shadow Forretress with Rock Tomb. The combination of the extra bulk from being non-Shadow and the guaranteed debuffs from Rock Tomb ended up making Forretress a surprisingly consistent core breaker. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and take a look at the team in action. Hopping into the first match, picking up a negative lead Malamar into a Azumarill, I'm going to throw one Psywave and then save switch to the Shadow Drapion. My charge attacks are completely walled here, so I'm hoping my opponent will eventually switch out. They're going to land the Ice Beam, and they're just going to stay in. And if they're going to stay in, then I'm going to start firing off these Crunches. Crunch is going to land onto the Azumarill. My opponent is now finally going to switch out as they bring in Dunsparce, but they have severely misaligned the switch clocks. After my next charge attack, I can actually switch out. This Crunch won't KO, it will get them deep into the red. Opponent is going to use the shield, I bring in Malamar, and they overfarm and let me get to a superpower. I'm very okay with the fact that I threw an alignment there. Being able to force their second shield is absolutely worth giving up a free rollout to them. And even though I'm debuffed, a Joran was still not KO. Switch clocks up, they save the Dunsparce with energy, and in comes the Azumarill. I'm debuffed, which means that my foul plays are going to do even less than normal, so even if I make another one here, I don't think it'll quite KO. I try to get there, but the bubble registers and I get knocked out. In comes Forretress, and the fact that every Azumarill is on Ice Beam play rough this season is one thing that does really benefit Forretress. Not only are you hitting for super effective with Volt Switch, you're debuffing their attack with Rock Tomb, but you're also a wall to their charge attacks. Combine that with the fact that it does very well against Alolan Sandslash and Shadow Drapion, which is a very common trio core, and you actually end up finding yourself a pretty interesting core breaker. Of course, the Pokemon that's on the other side of the screen here, Dunsparce, can also do pretty well into those three, but I wanted to try and think outside the box when it came to building the Legend team. In the back, my opponent has Drapion, and there's that Azumarill Drapion core that we talked about, getting core broken by the Forretress. Forretress lands the Earthquake, makes it to the Rock Tomb, and that's going to be a Game 1 win despite having a terrible lead, as Forretress is able to secure the win. Picking up a positive lead in the next match, Malamar versus Diggersby. Opponent is going to switch out into a Shadow Drapion, and I can just go for a superpower. I can throw it instantly because Switch takes a turn, so they're one turn behind, and then just bring in my own Drapion. Unfortunately, when I bring in the Drapion, I get one turn of lag, which means that when they throw, I should always get a Poison Sting through, but I don't get a Poison Sting through there. And this is actually going to end up impacting this game pretty severely, because instead of doubling up on Aqua Tails here and it coming down to a CMP tie, which my Drapion will typically win, I'm one short. So I'm forced to give up a shield that, if the game worked, there was a decent chance that I wouldn't have had to surrender. So my opponent is going to end up firing off that Aqua Tail to force the shield. They let through my Aqua Tail, and now they get energy on Diggersby. I bring in the Malamar. Malamar, I can survive a Scorching Sands, and I want to take damage before I debuff myself, so I'm going to farm up quite a bit of energy and build up to the back-to-back superpowers. One superpower, of course, is not going to KO. Diggersby is very, very bulky. Superpower is going to land. Opponent tries for a catch onto Toxapex. And this is another thing that Forretress just absolutely bullies. As the Toxapex, Poison Jab is going to do nothing because I'm the non-Shadow. Two Brines are going to do nothing as well. And now I can go for an Earthquake. It will hit for big super effective damage. I can Volt Switch all the way down, and this is just a very straightforward win from here. The Brine is going to connect. I get the full farm down, and I get to exit with the Earthquake loaded. Considering I have a superpower banked, they can't afford to shield this move. So, now that I've landed it, I can just bring in the Malamar, shield once, as the Fire Punch would easily knock out, and then just get the Psywave down. I'm pretty low on HP, but I still am able to take the win. Hopping into the next match, this will be a bit of a tricky one. Malamar vs Shadow Magnezone. Shadow Magnezone was very popular last season. With the rise of ground types, it's been a lot less common, but seeing it, even though I have a superpower user, is going to be a bit tricky. I'm going to bring in the Drapion. I go for the Aqua Tail intentionally on the CMP tie, expecting them to go for the Wild Charge, but they bait. They were at a Mirror Shot plus a Wild Charge, and they get the Mirror Shot debuff as well. So they can tank that Aqua Tail pretty comfortably. And now, things are looking honestly quite difficult. I will respect the potential wild charge. There it is. This should force the opponent out, and it does. In comes Malamar. I'm going to throw my crunch right before they're able to get to the superpower. They're one Psywave short, so if I do one more Poison Sting, I'm going to get outpaced. So what I'm forced to do is just fire off the Aqua Tail and then just let myself go. Because I don't have any shields, I have no way to prevent myself from getting knocked out by the superpower, but now this is going to set up farm for the Forretress. So I do get a nice farm down with the Forretress. Let's see, what do they have in the back? They're thinking about it. And they choose to send in a Drifblim. And this is another situation where Rock Tomb is very nice. If I was throwing mirror shots here, there would be no shot. But with Rock Tomb, things are honestly looking pretty decent. Opponent farms up, they switch into the Magna Zone. I switch out. And I think what I maybe had to do was just stay in and take the move on the Forretress, because Drifblim wins CMP over Forretress, and Shadow Ball is a great move. It KOs the Forretress. I felt like I had win cons in that endgame, but I just didn't execute. We see a terrible lead in the next match. Malamar into Wigglytuff. We are seeing a lot of old meta here. I tried to throw one Psywave and switch, but unfortunately, the game started there for a bit, so it ended up doing two Psywaves. My opponent shields an Aqua Tail and then brings in a Diggersby. My opponents so far, I really dislike the way that they've played this game, just because they could have very easily tanked that Aqua Tail on the Wigglytuff and then brought in the Diggersby, because now they've given me an energy advantage, I have a shield advantage, and I can just flip switch. Whereas, had they saved two shields for the Diggersby, it would have been a lot more difficult for me to flip switch, and they could have kept that Wigglytuff on Malamar alignment. Throwing here, they know they can't force switch, because I outpaced them strictly. So instead, they're going to bring in their final Pokemon, which is a Carbink. So the opponent running ABA Fairy, incredibly bold in a meta that is absolutely dominated by poison types. And I'm just going to bring in Malamar. Malamar farming up. I will use a shield, and I do have to watch for a potential Wigglytuff switch in. Even if they do switch in, landing a superpower would be quite nice, as it would set up a really nice Volt Switch farm down for Forretress. So in it comes, I fire off the superpower. Opponent is going to actually use the shield, and with energy banked on the Malamar, there's just no way for me to lose this game now. They will be going for Icy Winds, just looking to debuff the Forretress, but again, I'm intentionally running the non-Shadow Forretress, so I have a lot of extra bulk, which is very nice, specifically because I am running a lot glassier of a Malamar than most. This move's not going to matter. It's going to be a Swift. Swift, not going to do much of anything. In comes the Carbink, and I get to the Earthquake. This is a debuffed Earthquake. Carbink is stupendously bulky, so it barely hangs on, but the Volt Switch after picks up the knockout. In comes the Malamar to Psywave down the Wigglytuff, getting its revenge and taking the win. Malamar versus Ariados. This matchup is a very tricky one. Psywave, of course, deals massive super effective damage, but Malamar can one-shot with a double super effective lunge. So typically, I will play out at minimum the ones, and then try and just aggressively bring in the Drapion. I'm hoping that they end up going for a lunge onto the Drapion, and they do. I get the catch. This is very nice. Since I outpace the Ariados, if they stay in to try and rebank the move, I can just go for the Aqua Tail and either force a shield or pick up a knockout. And if they let this go, suddenly the threat of a lunge is gone. In comes Azumarill, opponent understanding that Drapions this season are running Crunch and Aqua Tail, which means that I have no charge moves that can damage them. I go for the Crunch. I do not get the debuff. I'm going to fire off another Crunch. They're going to exit with 100 energy. And that 100 energy is going to go exactly nowhere against the Forretress. So I bring in the Forretress. Opponent throws instantly because I believe they were either capped or just about at cap. They're farming up a lot of energy. I thought about the farm down, but if they're going to let me get to a Rock Tomb, I'm going to throw a Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb is going to pick up the knockout. In the back is Feraligatr, and that's just not a winning endgame for my opponent because I can hit for super effective damage and just debuff them continuously. We see a terrible lead in the next match. Malamar into Pangoro. Pangoro is a huge problem for this team. If you see Pangoro, you're going to be in for a very rough battle. I'm going to bring in the Drapion. They have so much energy, and I will use the shield. It's the close combat from the Pangoro. I wait the turn to make sure they don't catch the Aqua Tail as they send in Feraligatr, and I throw the correct move of Crunch. Crunch does pretty significant damage. Opponent If I can survive here, I can make the Aqua Tail, but I cannot. Shadow Feraligatr just hits so hard. I'm going to bring the Forretress because I do want to get an energy head start with the Forretress. We'll have to see, are they going to bring in Pangoro or do we see the final Pokemon revealed? Opponent is going to bring in Clodsire. I'm going to bring in Malamar. Opponent farming up a lot of energy. They send in Pangoro, but they gave me a huge energy head start. With that, this might be a winnable game. It's going to be a race. I get the superpower as they get the double up. And this is the easiest shield ever because they have 2 moves, but they don't get to use the second one because I clicked my superpower. Even at -1, it KOs. Back in comes the Clodsire, and Clodsire will look to pick up the knockout onto the heavily debuffed Malamar. Sludge Bomb secures the KO, and now I have a choice to make. Do I Rock Tomb first, or do I Earthquake? By my mental math, I think I can outpace straight Earthquake, so I am going to go for it. If I get outpaced, judging by the amount of health there, maybe I should have gone for the Rock Tomb first. We're going to have to see. Is my math correct? They throw here. Is it going to be the Earthquake? It is, and my mental math was wrong, and unfortunately, I lose because of it. We've got a mirror lead in the next match, Malamar versus Malamar. While I do win CMP in the mirror, of course, because I have an outrageously high attack Malamar, that honestly doesn't help a lot in the mirror, specifically because I just have a lot less bulk than my opponent. So even though I am going to be winning CMP, look how much damage that Foul Play did to me compared to theirs. And the difference in this matchup is that right here, my superpower, they tank it on 1 HP, and unfortunately, I'm not going to survive theirs. I really don't want to be down a shield and debuffed because if I'm debuffed, I'm probably going to be switching out anyway. So I think I may as well just give up switch and get the energy lead on the Drapion, and that immediately pays off as they are so weak to Drapion in the back. As in comes Feraligatr. Feraligatr down energy is not a response. Drapion just very, very cleanly wins this. I will keep firing off these crunches, pressuring the opponent more and more, and they will use the second shield. I get the crunch debuff, but realistically, that's not going to put it into Aqua Tail range just yet. They're very close to the move, so I'm going to have to fire off the crunch. I wait the turn to make sure they don't catch. I visually watch that Shadow Claw go through, and then I can pick up the knockout. In the back, we now see what they did not want to go up against the Drapion, and that's a Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn, even if it is running Thunder, there's not much it can do against the Forretress because, again, this is the non-Shadow Forretress. If I'm the Shadow, 2 Thunders might KO, but look at this. I am the non-Shadow. I can tank Thunders for days. I farm up, opponent realizes there's no winning this one, and they will resign the match. Malamar versus Clodsire, pretty decent lead for me. Opponent is going to save switch into Shadow Alolan Eradicate. Oh my goodness, the spice from the opponent. I'll be honest, I do not know what Alolan Eradicate counts are. I know it has Crunch, and normally if it's the Purified one, it runs Return, but obviously this is Shadow, so it's probably on Hyper Fang or Hyper Beam. That Crunch did a lot. I was not expecting that Crunch to hit that hard. They are already at another Crunch as well. I'm just going to go for the Earthquake. I want damage on this Pokemon, so I will fire off the Earthquake. The Earthquake is going to land. Opponent switches out and sends in the Clodsire. Clodsire, that's very fine. I get to connect with an Earthquake here or pressure their final shield. An Earthquake does a lot. They actually end up using the final shield. This is very okay. They're forced to go for a Stone Edge or an Earthquake to knock me out, so I'm never going to shield this. They bait with a Sludge Bomb. Oh no! Disaster strikes for the opponent as they play to a CMP tie that they do not win. The Earthquake connects, and now I should just be in the driver's seat of this match. I can bring in the Malamar. They go for the Sludge Bomb, and now I can just go for farm. Malamar energy, ever so dangerous, as I will be able to commit the shield as they go for the Earthquake. In comes the Eradicate. Honestly, in the moment, I forgot how healthy it was, so I go for a superpower. I could have just gone for a Foul Play. Back in comes the Clodsire. I frame drop, and they get a move on 1 HP. No, the Sludge Bomb lands. Unfortunately, now I lose all that energy, and it's Pangoro in the back. I could have played the game a lot cleaner. If I Foul Play with the Malamar and I'm not debuffed, it's just a guaranteed win. But unfortunately, even with my misplay, I still should have won, but you saw there, the stuttering of the Malamar meant that my Psywave didn't go through, and my opponent is able to pick up that KO. We move to the next match, Malamar versus the Shadow Dragonite. Shadow Dragonite, while it is very, very oppressive, Malamar wins the 0s and the 1s. So I'm very happy to play out 0s here because I know that I'm always going to be able to win it. And if my opponent really wants to shield, they can be my guest, because now I'm just going to go for farm on Forretress. Dragonite is often paired with waters, and if this water's in the back, then Forretress up energy can put in a lot of work. There's the superpower and the switch out into Dugong. Trainer, this is not a response to Forretress whatsoever, and this is another situation where Rock Tomb is so clutch. It's super effective damage, and it debuffs them, so this drill run is going to do nothing. They go for an Icy Wind, hoping that that is going to allow them to tank a second Rock Tomb and potentially connect with the drill run. But Rock Tomb still picks up the KO. Are they going to bring in the Dragonite? No, it's Toxapex in the back. I'm going to farm up. Again, I wait the turn. I cannot afford them catching an Earthquake onto the Dragonite. The Earthquake connects, and this game is instantly over, as now I can just pivot into the Shadow Drapion, and my opponent no longer has a win con. The Brine is going to land, in comes the Dragonite, it just gets fully farmed down, and this game is over, as I can just launch crunches at the Toxapex. They only have one shield, and I can very reliably make 2 moves. I get the least impactful defense drop ever. Even if I don't have the defense drop there, the game is still done because the crunch just does too much damage, but in this instance, it just makes the game go by a little bit faster. Hopping into the final match, picking up a bit of a tricky lead, Gastrodon against my Malamar. Mudslappers as a whole are uncomfortable for this team to deal with. Malamar is of course the best answer because it just has neutral play. Drapion hates the Mudslappers, and Forretress, while it only takes neutral from the Mudslappers, is still uncomfortable because Volt Switch is usually going to be heavily resisted. Opponent is at the back-to-back body slams. They don't throw right away, however, and them not throwing right away means that I actually get to force a shield out of this matchup. I'm going to pivot into Forretress as my opponent is going to fire off their energy. This is a rare instance that since they have the water subtyping, Volt Switch is only going to be single resisted, so I'm going to get a sick farm down there as they fall just short of the Earth Power. They're going to bring in Mandibuzz, and I'm going to throw 2 to throw in good timing, but that does cause me to go over 100 energy, which is not great. Rock Tomb will connect. That, of course, will come with its signature guaranteed attack drop. Opponent goes for the Dark Pulse. I continue to farm with the Forretress, going for another Rock Tomb, and while this will not KO, it's going to put a lot of pressure onto my opponent. They're going to no-shield. I switch into the Drapion. In the back is Dugong, so they were so weak once that Gastrodon was out of the way to the Forretress. And up energy, Drapion is just devastating. The crunch connects. They throw instantly, looking to apply a debuff. Even though, oh my goodness, they actually go for the drill run. I was going to say, even though it's highly likely they Icy Wind bait, I just always have to potentially cover for the fact that they could go for a bit of a Hail Mary drill run there. And they do actually go for the Hail Mary drill run. So by shielding it, I'm just in a very comfortable position now. Here, to add a little insult to injury, we're getting a catch back onto the Forretress. Aerial Ace is going to KO after 1 additional Snarl, but Shadow Drapion is not in Aerial Ace range. Aerial Ace from Mandibuzz does not do a lot, so Drapion is going to get the Poison Sting farm down, and that is a good game. All in all, I had a ton of fun getting to run this team. For the final push, this is probably the team that I used for like 80% of the games, and I did have a separate Galar Moltres team that I did interchange periodically, but overall, this was primarily the team that I used over the past few days to get very close to Legend a couple times, and unfortunately, I had some sets where a 3-2 could have been Legend, but I had some frame drop losses, so I ended up going 2-3, but the good news is, we did it. The Legend push has concluded, and with a Pokemon that I don't feel like a lot of people are running, the Rock Tomb Forretress, so I'm happy to be able to hit Legend with a pretty unique team. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.